Hey everyone, today we're going to look at painting skin tones on tabletop miniatures. I found a new to me, simple game that is way out of print, but the rules are still available for download. The game will give me an opportunity to play with the 3D resin printer and do some old school crafting. This game is called Ludius Gladiatorius, and it came with 5 pre-printed figures and gladiator cards for 10 gladiators. Now, like I said, it's out of print, so I went to my mini factory and I found Ian Lovecraft's Historical Gladiators, which will give me 14 gladiators and a bear. The miniatures are approximately 32 millimeter and come pre-supported, so 2 full build plates of printing later, and we have all the gladiators ready for priming. I separated the figures into 4 basic skin tones, and we'll start with the most complicated, the dark African skin. I started my base coat with violet purple color. I made sure to thin my paints well, and as you can see here, coverage isn't full, but you can see how the flat black prime pulls the brightness out of the purple and pulls it back to a really nice skin tone when it's finally dry. What I like to call the top layer skin tone is a combination of leather and burnt red. For this figure, I dry brushed the color over the entire base coat to get a 95% coverage. Here you can see how the dark skin tone is really starting to take shape after the dry brushing dries. But it's now time to bring the darkest shadows back up with a dark tone wash. Just don't allow excess pooling or puddling. Keep it moving and use a clean brush to wick away any excess. Now it's time to add back the highlights, mixing some red beige into the leather brown, and using a much smaller dry brush, I kept to just the high surfaces. The process is pretty much the same for the other skin tones, with the exception that I opted to double coat the base color to get a full coverage over the black prime. The Mediterranean or Roman skin started from a medium flesh tone, which is from Vallejo, and it kind of is a yellow, orange, brown color. This was followed up with a soft tone wash and a highlight of tanned flesh from Army Painter. For the Athenian or Amazon skin tones, I started from a US field drab undertone over the black. This was followed up by a strong tone wash and a highlight of that same drab color. And finally, the Celtic skin started from a sand brown color of that black, and the wash used was flesh wash, which is a light brown with a reddish tone. A final highlight was done with barbarian flesh. After all the skin was finished, the models were given another overnight dry and cure. That way the paint and washes would be ready for the next step. Oil washes. For all the skin tones, I chose to go back to a violet oil paint. After thinning the oil paint, I liberally applied it to all the skin, and I set each model aside for 20 minutes. I started with the dry cotton swabs to remove the bulk of the color, and then I moved to thinner dampened swabs and brushes. These allowed me to be a little more precise with the amount of removal, or I could use the cotton swab just to kind of scrub the stubborn areas where the paint just didn't want to remove at all. I really like oil washes. The paints are highly pigmented and stay true to color no matter how much you dilute them, which you need to use mineral spirits to do that, of course. And like I said before, if you make a mistake and go over onto the clothing area, or you get too heavy with the oil wash, you can just come back with a brush soaked in those mineral spirits and wipe away the excess. My goal was to make the skin appear to have blood flowing through it. No, not like the fighters were bleeding out, but rather that look of health and vitality. After the 5 to 7 days of drying time, I was able to come back in and finish the miniatures off with a combination of metallic paints for weapons and armor and acrylics for the non-metallic areas. Basing was new to me, using Vallejo's earth texture, which goes on with a coffee stirrer or brush and hardens to really hold shape well. To bring out the texture, I used speed paints to deepen the shadows, and then I just came back with a quick dry brush of a lighter sand color to really bring up the texture. And here we are. Here's the finished gladiators, ready for some gruesome combat at the Colosseum. I hope this video has helped you understand some basic concepts on how to paint various skin tones. But the main takeaway is to try something a little different from time to time. And just play. The worst thing that can happen is you screw it up and you have to reprime and start beginning and go back to your old standby. Like I always say, we need to continue to push our boundaries to learn. So until next time, happy hobbying.